I'm autistic as fuck. Like I'll just start with that first. And like my mind bounces around too damn much. And when it comes to like sports and whatnot, you know, like people think that when it comes to guys who lift weights and all everything like that, they're always like super interested in sports. But what are some of the things that I know you kind of refer to yourself as a nerd, but what are the things you actually consider nerdy? Like I just
Oh,
can't see what that is
yeah,
for
no,
you.
I'm not a classic nerd. I nerd
Mm,
out about like normal people things, I guess.
mm,
Nerdy to me is like RPG video games, Harry Potter,
mhm,
that kind of stuff. For me,
mm,
I've never been into any of that. It's
mhm.
just lifting, hockey. So you'd think I'm like a normal, cool guy, but no, I'm a little nerdy
Oh, okay.
when it
Yeah,
comes to
because
things.
okay. Like for a moment when you said like I'm nerdy about like normal people things, I was like, okay, so you like go to Home Depot, like you like seeing like everything in the aisles, like something like that. I mean, honestly, like I've had to like do my fair share of like fixing things in gyms and in like my home and stuff. And I'm gonna be real with you. I used to hate going to Home Depot with like my parents or something like that. But now when I go there, I like it does feel like kind of fun and like I don't know, something interesting about just looking at all the different
It
tools, you know?
taps into your creativity. You're like, oh,
Hmm.
that can be used as this, and oh,
Hmm.
my this kind of sucks in my house. This would make it look a bit
Hmm.
nicer. I think the problem is we're the wrong age because as soon as I got into all that kind of stuff,
Hmm.
inflation happened pretty bad, and the
Mm.
U.S. pumped a few $1 trillion into the economy, and everything doubled in price, and we didn't really get paid anymore. So
Nope.
it's a
So
little heavy
true.
projects are a bit
Mhm.
more now, but no, it's been fun. That's like one of the recent projects that I took up was building an office over here, and that's
Mm.
one of those things where it's like once you learn more about it, the opportunities kind of open up a little bit. It's almost like lifting in a way where
Mhm.
you first start and you're like, oh, just volume and lifts, and
Mm.
there's only things that matter, and then you learn more, and it gets a little bit more nuanced. Kind of the same thing with this, where it's like you learn how to use a nail gun, and then you learn how to like put up a wall and put whatever on that wall and do electric work, whatever. Not that I've done electric work, but
Mm.
learn those things, and your brain can start to go. So next step for me is building a patio, and I
Mm.
have not the most level backyard, so that adds another curveball to it. What about you, man?
Um, I've tried making like some like this is gonna like go to a question I have for you too, but I've made some like weird contraptions that I try to like for gym equipment, right? I see the expensive thing online. I'm like, all right, let me try to make a really ghetto version of that. I think Alec on Kiri had a video where he talked about like the tib bar. So like I was dealing with a lot of knee pain back during global events when all I could do was like calisthenics and running. So those were the main things I did. But I was also dealing with severe knee pain. So I had to like put together a bunch of pipes, a bunch of tubes, like screw them together, weld them on and stuff like that. And like just making like a bunch of equipment. So I was going to ask you, like, you know, now that you're getting a bit more hands-on with tools and whatnot, have you decided to make any like makeshift equipment in your gym or add things to your gym? Like just thinking to yourself like, oh, I could just build that myself.
I've strongly considered it. One thing I tried that didn't end up working was I have this Smith next to me, and that thing it doesn't have counterweight. So one
Mm,
racking the bar is a pain in the ass because you have to actually lift it because it's probably 60 pounds or something. It's a bar with extra collars and sleeves and whatnot on the end, so it is
mm,
pretty decently heavy. And I tried to. It has counterweights, but for some reason, like they weren't working. The guy that sold it to me was like, "Oh, this doesn't work." I don't remember anything about it. I was just pumped to have a Smith, and then
mm-hmm,
I ended up going to Tractor Supply. I got pulleys that I just put on kind of upside down and screwed into the top of the Smith, and I thought it was genius, but I guess I didn't realize that they're too high up, so it's actually hitting the bottom of my floor in the main level.
mm.
So it didn't quite work. So I thought I was making a good call and everything, but it turns out I just wasted 3 or 4 hours and 50 bucks.
No, I've definitely been there too. Like, there was a day where at at my work, like some dingus kind of forgot how a door works, like a push door. And instead of pushing forward, he pushes down on it and the whole thing just comes off. And I just like spent like entire afternoon trying to fix a door. And like I've never like learned how to do that whatsoever. I was like, I don't even know what I was looking at. And I just spent like 10 minutes just standing there dumbfounded looking at it, just like like just doing that for a good like while, trying to figure out what was going on. And then I started seeing the equations in my head, and then I spent another hour like putting it together, realizing how wrong I was multiple times. And then like the actual process of fixing it only took about 5 minutes, but it took that like couple hours of just like fumbling around. So it's really fun, but I will admit, like, being hands-on when you're not taught how to be hands-on, you start feeling really smart, and then all of a sudden you're spending so much hours just being dumb. But that's
Yeah.
like lifting too, honestly, like programming, training. Like you spend sometimes thinking like you have this bright idea, you start implementing it, and then it doesn't work out nearly as well, but you actually get smarter as a result. At least that's what I found.
Yeah, I think with lifting, it's one of those things where a lot of advanced lifters oversimplify it in their own heads because they
Mm.
truly understand everything.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to make sure that I don't do this myself because in my mind, lifting is, I guess, like a bit simple. At least what I understand is pretty simple to me. But
Hmm.
until you have that experience, it is not simple because you have no experience to base anything off of. So a beginner lifter could say, oh, well, more volume is better, just for a random example. And for myself, I could say, well, I tried higher volume and I tried lower volume, and
Hmm.
I've listened to this enough times and I've thought about it myself enough to truly compare that to my experience and my ideas and my thoughts and whatnot. So I think it's one of those things where a lot of people like to oversimplify it, but until you learn it, it's like it's not simple. Like if it was that simple, everybody would be an advanced lifter and everybody would be able to self coach and learn everything themselves quickly,
Mm.
but not the case.
Not the case at all. And like sometimes I also see people like either romanticize or kind of hold like in too high regard like the people who came before us, and like obviously all props and respect to them, but sometimes they'll say things like, the old school bodybuilders have been saying this for 70 years, they already figured it out, like how can we keep talking about it? And like the reason why I think the common analogy is like passing the torch is because once the torch is lit, we don't just like keep it where it's at. Like we try to like carry it around. We try to like keep the light moving, like bring it to the people who need it. And I think sometimes people kind of get fed up with hearing the same message, but at the same time, it's like that's the only way that we can make sure that people are still on the right path. And that's why I'm really appreciative for like your channel too, because when the message starts getting skewed in a direction that might be pulling people away from what they actually want, your channel came up and is succeeding where it's at now, and like for great reasons. So one question I wanted to kind of ask you is like, what is it like now that you are like going full time into it? Like what has your experience been since starting the channel, like since doing the channel full time?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. It's one I want to say it's fun and it's not it's not like as glamorous as it might seem or like how my former self might have thought it would be, but
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely rewarding and it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely what I enjoy to do. And that's how I think I'm able to keep it going. I think if it was something that I took for granted or something that I thought was cooler than it would be, then I don't think it would work. But I kind of get up every day where I'm like, you kind of get that butterfly in your stomach. And you're like, oh, I have the time and the resources to go make this video about this topic how I want to and
Mm-hmm.
post it and actually have people not just watch it but benefit from it too. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been enjoyable. So I think one of the tough parts about content creation is just a lot of people get caught up, and I say this a lot. They get caught up kind of like they get almost like stuck in a rut, and they kind of stop learning, and then their channel just dies. And I guess it's easy to almost see that as something that you can fall into, but I guess I'm trying to combat that by keeping an open mind, staying creative, and always learning, which is fun. Like I'm not forcing myself to do it. I do the shit anyways. Like I enjoy to go learn and listen to other people's takes and experiment with things in my training. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like opened those doors for me to be able to have the time and resources to do that. So I'm super grateful for it.
Yeah, that's what's up. I remember like when I talked with you a long time ago, you said that you had spent a absorbent amount of time like writing out certain fitness topics and certain ideas that you had in your head. Now that you've learned so much, did you ever like cross out certain ideas from your list, like that you didn't talk about yet, because like what you learned just kind of eliminated the need to make a video regarding that? Like, has that ever happened to you?
Certainly. I think one of the more interesting things is that I started off with this massive list that I'd been compiling for years. of just video topics and ideas. Not that I didn't even plan doing a channel, but I was like, if I ever do a channel,
Mm,
these are ideas that I have. And it was just a bunch of bullet points. And like, I would say a lot of those are either, most of them are just too vague. Not that I
mm,
changed my mind a ton or disagree with what I used to say, but it would be like something like, there's one particular idea I remember having, like 5x5 sucks for bodybuilding. And I'm like,
mm,
okay, well, that could be a video, but at the same time, it's like that's something that I would break down a little bit deeper and analyze it a bit more rather than just, oh, this set and rep scheme isn't good. I would talk
mhm,
more about maybe like the benefits of like a fluctuation in a rep range or like a dynamic rep range rather than 5x5 sucks. And this thing in particular, I'm not a fan of. So I guess it's like just very vague ideas
mhm,
that I can draw inspiration from, but that I probably wouldn't make like actual videos on. I still pretty much have that whole list. And I find that one of the weirder things is that I planned on just kind of checking through that list, but I feel like every time before I have a new thing I want to make on that list happen, I get another idea and I just make that video instead. So I think it's finding that balance between going through that list, but also keeping like there's some videos that I've made and I haven't uploaded because I'm not truly feeling it or not too passionate about it. And I think that's one of the qualities that makes a good channel is you have to be engaged with what you're talking about. So there's a reason why in the middle of a bulk, I won't talk about like cutting advice because I'm not into it at the moment. I'm not passionate about it. So I'd rather wait for that time where I'm fully in on it. Like I had a video
mhm,
last year where I was talking about like strength standards and why I don't care about them and whatnot, and or strength blocks. I had a video on that too. And it's like at that point in time, I just had this clear passion about that thing, and that led to it having probably the best impact that it could. Versus if I was to talk about that now, where I'm just it's the last thing on my mind, it would be kind of monotonous
mm.
and I guess kind of cut and dry.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and that's what kind of made it difficult to make content for me for quite a while. So like, there's a couple pieces of content that I really wanted to like put my whole heart into because I was really passionate about it. But then I kind of came up against the wall where I was just like, well, I don't really think I know enough, quite honestly. So I have been like doing like martial arts instruction and like strength and conditioning for the past like 2 years now. And I haven't really put out a video on it quite yet, just because I'm, as much as I'm like still in that world, as much as I'm still like dealing with those clients and like, helping them and helping them navigate through like those beginner stages and those beginner years. I just feel like there's the experience part of it. And then there's also the part where you kind of formalize your experience. So when you can say like, you're learning things and stuff like that, is that kind of like your process as well, where like you put yourself through it, like and then you just kind of take note of everything that's happening to you and like your experiences, and then like after that you kind of reflect on it and then kind of bring that information to the people who watch you?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think with lifting, the cool thing about it is I waited a long time before making the channel, so I already had like years and years of experience, and now it's like that's what my general philosophies are based on, and then anything extra that I learned is more of like a bonus, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So I don't like expect to try a certain lift or a certain amount of volume for 3 months, then have this like genius video and reflection on it. I think that's probably stretching it a bit, but I think using that to further develop my kind of core base philosophy in a way is how I'd put that.
Is there anything that from when you started the channel to now that is drastically different in your thinking, or would you say that everything's just like a bit more fully developed rather than drastically different?
I'd say, yeah, probably not drastically different, maybe just more, yeah, more developed is the way to put it. I've learned a lot in the past year. Like since
Hmm.
having a channel, I mean, it's like it's a unique opportunity because it's not like there's that many channels. So to be able
Hmm.
to connect with people that are just more experienced than me and people that are much smarter than I am, and just it's cool to be able to do that because I'm experienced, but I'm not a veteran. Like I'm still early on, especially in content creation.
Hmm.
That's something I'm definitely pretty new in. But as far as lifting goes, I still got a ton to learn, and
Hmm.
it's it's been, I guess, to a point where you have the, I don't want to say the pressure of having the channel because I don't feel any pressure, but when you
Hmm.
know that there's going to be X amount of people that watch this video guaranteed, and it could have this many people watch it. You really rack your brain and
Mm,
really challenge yourself. You play devil's advocate against yourself and really solidify things versus before, where it's like you get an idea, but you don't have that strange pressure. And it's like, it's a strange thing because it's like, not most lifters don't make videos like I do, which is fine. They don't have to. It's just something I do for fun. But
mm,
when you're just lifting, you don't question things as much, at least in my own experience. But now that I lift and I quote unquote owe that experience and those thoughts to all my subscribers, it makes me rack my brain more and think about it and really solidify my takes. But at the same time, it's finding that balance between doing what I just said, but also not being a perfectionist, which I think the backwards hat and the flannel and the grungy basement prevents me from becoming a perfectionist. And that's kind of why I like to keep it this way.
hey, that's what's up. So I guess I just need to get more flannels then.
That's basically the secret, man. Get the flannels and start with a green hat. I've moved on to yellow for summer, but
Mhm.
that's the secret.
Nice, color coordinated for seasons. Cool. So one thing that I wanted to kind of ask you about was like there is a one of your recent videos, like rep ranges. I think rep range is one of those topics that has been, it's been talked about like since I started lifting. Like, what is the best rep range for this exercise or this purpose or something of that nature? And sometimes we will get the advice that thing, like, it's not really the idea itself that matters. Like, rep ranges itself doesn't matter. It's how you progress it or something of that nature, or it's how you program it or something like that. But I really did like how in your video you said like rep ranges do matter. um I know that that is already a video you have on your channel, but like, do you mind like kind of like sharing a bit more of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think not everything that matters has to be a do or die. So that's the
Mm,
first thing I want to say, where people are like, people get so black pilled with this stuff. They're like, oh, if you don't do this, you're not going to make any gains, or if you do this, you'll make all the gains. But what about those little more nuanced things where it's like, yeah, if you're not in the optimal rep range, your gains aren't going to be optimal, but you'll still get jacked. Why does that all of a sudden not matter? And I think it's one of those things where you should probably like think about it a little bit at least, or try and optimize it. Like, all right, you can optimize the big variables, but why not continue if it's so simple and it's so easy? Like, shouldn't you have more freedom to make things even better? Or like, the way I see it is like, you should understand why you're doing that rep range. And a lot of people, and this is what I say to a lot of people, is that you a lot of the things that I say, especially that I said in that video, people already knew. They just didn't understand it. Like, they
mm,
knew. A lot of people were like, "Oh, I got a few comments. Oh, it's funny you say that, because that's something I always kind of knew, but I couldn't quite grasp why." And you
mm,
you articulate it in a way that made me understand it. And that's exactly what I try and do with the channel, is say things that I used to have questions on, that I want other people to have those questions now to understand. So something like, when you're doing a barbell curl and the bar gets in front of you more than when you start the movement, and it pulls you forwards, and that's why it feels weirder when you go heavy. A lot of people know that it feels weird, but they don't know why. So when I can
mm,
tell it feels weird because it moves in multiple planes and it goes in front of you and your center of gravity changes, a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's super interesting. That's a cool thing to think about." So even if it's like something that isn't the most important thing, I think it just having a good foundation and understanding is important. And it's like, the way I see it is, it's like, I guess it's like college in a way, where you get so many people that are like, "Oh, what's the point of taking this class if it has nothing to do with my major?" Well, it's like, oh, well, if you take 90 different courses, that's just a random number. That
mm,
can probably help you understand your 91st course better than 0 courses helps you understand the one course that matters, right? So
mm.
I don't
Yeah,
know. I just like to get people thinking and get people, I guess, more detail oriented. The pros and the best of the best are all detail oriented. Well, you can say it doesn't matter all you want, but I disagree.
true. And I mean, like, even if, like, let's say you take that approach, like, it doesn't matter, and you say, well, focus on hard work or focus on this or focus on that. Usually it's always done with the intention to get them to have a better understanding of that thing that doesn't matter. Like, like things related to auto regulation, I guess you could say, or like how you manipulate volume, intensity, and frequency, and things of that nature. Like over the long term, they matter like quite a lot. And the thing that calibrates that, of course, is the existence of like, or the putting in of hard work and things of that nature. But if you kind of if you remove that endpoint of having that understanding, and then you just like focus on solely hard work, that's where you kind of, at least that's where I think, like, the burnout and spinning your wheels kind of happens, because the effort has lost its direction essentially. Have you ever experienced that or thinking that way?
Yeah, well, I've done that in the past where it's like bodybuilding and becoming a good lifter isn't just hard work. You have to work hard, and then you have to use your understanding of programming to take that energy of the hard work and direct it into something useful. And too many people lose that, where a lot of people, you see a lot of guys bust their ass and train hard, but they don't do anything with it because maybe they're not training often enough, or maybe they're not doing enough volume, or maybe they're doing too much volume. They have no idea how recovery works, and they're just like, oh well, just work hard, it will all work out. So programming is what makes lifters elite. That's what makes them advanced and better. And I think you can even compare that to strength sports, where I guess I want to say the programming is like a bit more tangible, and you probably understand what I mean by that. Uh, the programming's key. Nobody just feels their way into becoming an elite power lifter, elite strongman, right? It's like,
Mhm.
so why is it not that way for bodybuilding? And I'm not saying you have to program the way they do, but why does it have less importance?
Yeah, and like that's why I really like. I remember one of like conversation we had. I like the analogy of where people kind of compare hard work and smart work, or programming versus mindset, or something of the nature. And it's just like, dude, like you're comparing which is better, your right or left hand. You need
Yeah,
both,
spot on, spot
Like,
on.
the idea that we can somehow isolate certain things. I think in a recent video, Coach Paris Butler, Ball on Me Man, like said how people are constantly looking for things that they can like. How much can I slack off on this before I notice a decrease in my like gains, essentially? And it's like, you know, building muscle is a very forgiving adaptation. There's a lot of things that you can get wrong and still get jacked. But if you really wanted like the absolute most of things, why are you asking what can I slack off on? That's like the first, I guess, I think that's like cognitive dissonance, I would say, right? Like, where you're actively trying to get the most of something by putting less in.
Hmm. Yeah, I would. That's definitely pretty interesting, and you see that a lot. And I think those people just they don't have that. I guess I don't want to say optimistic mindset, but you have to be.
They don't got that dog in them.
They do not have that dog in them. Like someone like me or you, we got that dog in us, right? No.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
think I think the mindset needs evolution. I think that's a starting point. I think mindset and work ethic and understanding of programming's key. And too
Mhm.
many people try and separate them. Like, I can't stand this when someone asks like a programming question. They're like, "It doesn't matter, just work hard." And it's like, well, and it's so anybody that wants to understand how to lift and program,
Mhm.
they don't work hard. They just have no idea how to train hard. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, the people that don't train hard, of course, you have to you have to teach them how to work hard first, because then you got nothing to work with. But
Mhm.
what if the person is working hard, right?
Exactly. And I mean, like, if you look at like the silver era guys and whatnot, like it's not that they only worked hard. Their training was incredibly smart.
Yeah.
They're like they spent a lot of time thinking about their training and like their programming, their recovery, and things of that nature. Their diet. They put a lot of effort into these details because absent drugs, that's what will take you to that next level. It's always going to be like your mindset and then those finer details. So when like discussions come up like that, I definitely understand it, because I've coached many people. I've met the common person at the gym, and when I say common, I don't mean like the lowest level people. I just mean like the frequency of the type of people. Well, like the ones who don't necessarily know what they're doing. They just know they want to get bigger, or they want to get stronger, or something like that, but they just don't know much about fitness. And that's most people in the gym. They just know that if you want to get big, you go to a gym, and then there's things there that you pick up and put down. But that's kind of the extent of where they're at that moment. So having spent so much time as a personal trainer and talking with them, like you gear them toward obviously hard work, but for the purpose of mastering those finer details, and removing yourself from it is only going to keep a person small and weak. And I think that it also diminishes like their understanding as well. Like I think people nowadays are just black pilled into a lot of different ways. Like lifters are black pilled into thinking they can't achieve much. And then I think sometimes like some people, when they're trying to give advice, they're black pilled into thinking that people can't understand like a lot of different things at once. And as a result, they give these like super simple, super uber reductionist pieces of advice. And can't I just can't abide that. You know what I mean? Like, how do you feel on that?
Yeah, you're spot on. Spot on. I think when it comes to people giving advice, the way I see it is people, you summed it up so nicely. People think that the people they're talking to just can't wrap their head around multiple things at once. So they just have no understanding of anything and they need to be told this watered down, spoon fed advice. And that's not in their best interest at all. Because then you get beginners, and I see this all the time where beginners think they know everything.
Mhm.
Not the case, because advanced lifters oversimplify things, and I think that's where like I get their intentions might not be bad. I'd argue sometimes they are. I think a lot of advanced lifters or more experienced lifters can be a little bit more. Uh, I don't want to say like condescending, but they can be kind of condescending. Maybe they get questions all the time and they're just annoyed and they're like, "Oh, just get stronger, just go do that, blah blah blah. Don't worry about the rest."
Mhm.
And I think that's bad advice because you're oversimplifying something that is not that simple. And I think
Mhm.
that's something that people that are experienced in lifting tend to forget. It's like you don't like, yeah, in my mind, is lifting simple? Sure. But I don't, I have to say, all right, well, I understand lifting. Lifting is not simple to me, but my understanding and my experience in lifting has been simplified in my brain.
Mhm.
But what about all those years? Like, I spent a year and a half making no gains whatsoever, just chasing these weird, obscure powerlifting technique 1 rep maxes. And
Mhm.
it's like lifting isn't that simple because if it was that simple, wouldn't I have not made that mistake? Right. And there's
Right.
a bazillion other mistakes I've made. So
Mhm.
I think giving out oversimplified advice leads people down the wrong path. And
Mhm.
I would love to take ownership and say that I'm the one that chose to follow those methods and follow that advice. So it is ultimately my fault. But at
Mhm.
the same time, the last thing I'd want to do is see more people make that mistake, especially someone, if there's a younger version of myself out there, a younger version of you, like,
Mhm.
I wouldn't want to have that person waste years upon years going down that path, beating themselves into the ground for no benefit, right?
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. Because like, in my opinion, like this is just like what I've seen. There is no shortage of people who can work hard or are even working hard, right? Like there's a surplus of them, quite honestly. Um, and it's just a matter of how much respect someone is willing to give them to meet them where they're at, but also point them in the direction of where they're trying to go. Like that's the thing that has like really struck me as, a coach or as an instructor and a bunch of other things. It's that most people, like, they want to work hard. The ones who really love lifting, who really love training, they already want to work hard. But it's just a matter of like the access of information. It's almost diminishing, or almost it almost feeds into that like defeatist mindset when they're said like you're either not working hard enough or just keep doing that. And then like this, like you run into this cycle, well, like I'm working all, like so hard but I'm not getting any results. And then it's like, and then the person who you look up to is just saying, well, work harder, or like something of the nature, right? Like I 100% agree with that. And um when it comes to training, programming, and things of that nature, it's not rocket science by any means, but at the same time, it's still a science. It's still a art. It still deserves respect, time, effort, learning, humility, and things of that nature. And if hard work was the only thing that mattered when you were tracing those 1 RMs and things of that nature, you would have, if hard work was the only thing that mattered, you would reach the physique you have now. And you obviously didn't. It was the programming, the mindset, the thought processes that kind of like came from that made you get to where you're at right now. So one question I wanted to kind of ask you was, were there any mental obstacles you faced transitioning from the style of training that you had been doing for so long to like how you're training now, or was it a pretty seamless thing?
The toughest part that I had to go through, and this is the toughest part that anybody will really go through, in my opinion, that most people will go through, is your your workouts won't feel as much like a workout because it's less systemic fatigue. So I get
Mm,
this happens a lot with my clients where they're like, "Whoa, like I don't feel like I'm working as hard," and I'm like, just wait, you're fine. Like I'll take a look at their form clips, everything's good, you're fine, you're training that muscle effectively. Like uh, there's like hypertrophy, you have to train very hard. And I'm 100% for that. If you watch any of my training clips,
mhm,
I train pretty hard, and I will not argue that that's not important. But you get a lot of people that think that they have to like sweat and feel the burn and get their heart rate up, and they want to be like out of breath. It's like you want to be like going through that grind, but then it's like
mhm,
you finish a set of cable lateral raises, which is a very effective exercise for the side delts, but
mhm,
you don't feel like, oh, like you don't feel that systemic fatigue from that. And you're like, wait, that didn't feel effective. Like that didn't feel hard.
mhm,
But they're not focusing on the local, they're focusing more on the systemic. Atlas Power Shrugged. I briefly read through his post. He had one on Instagram where people were so caught up in I guess like the short term that they sacrifice their long term. I don't know if you saw that post that he made either, but I thought it was great where just to summarize it very, very briefly, he's essentially saying that people will sacrifice the betterment of themselves in a strategic method just to focus on the quick little pleasure they get from a short term uh like I guess challenge. So people love like ice baths where
mm,
they'll get that rush real quick after that ice bath for 5 minutes,
mhm.
but you're not actually working towards something. And people love that like grind and go all out and just crush yourself real quick and
Yeah.
do things you didn't think you could do. When in reality, he's saying that that doesn't actually boost your baseline. So if you're trying to get better at something or build mental toughness or confidence, you're not actually building your baseline. Where it would be more productive to say, all right, well, a pure hypertrophy session isn't going to smoke you. It's not going to kill you. It's going to be ridiculously hard, but you won't feel it in that same way that you would have like a hit
Mhm,
session or a powerlifting workout or
mhm,
strength and conditioning workout is probably the best comparable I could use there.
mhm,
But those sessions build your baseline, and each time you go back to the gym, you're a little bigger. Every month, you're a little bigger, and then each year, your baseline is now higher. So you're
mhm.
not in that dark spot where you need that ice bath to shock you anymore. You have a great physique, and now your baseline of what you feel is much higher. And he can articulate it far better than I could. That was just a rambly kind of word salad summary of what he posted, but I think he's spot on with that, and I don't see a whole ton of people talking about it.
Yeah, I love his Instagram page, like his all of his odd lifts, and yeah, his written posts are really good as well. There's another
Yeah,
other guy who like does really odd lifts as well, but has like really well written posts also. Like those two, I like honestly, it saves Instagram for me, where I'm just like, this place is not that bad. So love those two. I'm gonna try to find them and hopefully like put them in the description. But anyway, so I remember what I wanted to ask you about, like with what you said. So that it was about the intensity of things, right? Like people want to do the thing that's intense. They want to do the thing that's like in the moment difficult, but then like the long term thing, they want to, for lack of better words, like that come to mind, like slack off on. So, for example, it's far easier to throw a lot of ice into a tub and sit in it than it is to really reorganize your environment to sleep better and get like those 8-9 hours. It's far easier to do that if the purpose is
yeah,
recovery, and that's what people like think is going to be better. It's just like, I'm going to do an ice bath. It's like, how many hours of sleep are you getting? Like you will be more rewarded by doing that more long-term thing. And that's why like I really sometimes I tell people, especially my some of my clients who like I said, there's no shortage of hard work that come from most of my clients. It's just a matter of like me sometimes telling them like, you can't put in tomorrow's work and get tomorrow's pay like today. Like you have to do what is needed like to like in this session, what's needed for progress in this session. If you work so hard that your next session suffers, like you're actually taking a back step. You're like, you shouldn't take loans out on your future potential, like you have to like rise to what you need to do right now. And going above that is cool. Like we praise that in like almost everything else in life. But I'm not saying like do less. I'm saying do exactly what is needed. And it's kind of hard. And that is a range, like it's not like a pinpoint accurate place. But a lot of people like think that overshooting or like getting out of the pocket or things of that nature is actually going to be rewarding for them, when actually sometimes that's exactly what's holding them back. Like I think most people really undervalue consistency, um, and being able to maintain a certain pace is far better than like having to sporadically sprint and stop and sprint and stop. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think it's relatable to say certain restrictive diets where it's like I'd argue that it's harder for most people to eat healthy than it is to go on keto or to be vegan. The reason that those diets are so attractive is because they don't have to. I'm not saying they're not hard, but they don't have to work hard. Where it's like, all right, well, if everybody's going out to get pizza, if you're vegan, you can't get pizza because it
Mhm.
has milk or cheese or whatever. But if you're not restricting yourself and you're just choosing to do the thing that's less rewarding but more beneficial, where you're just not limiting yourself but eating healthy, that's harder because it's not as rewarding as being able to say, I'm vegan and I made this good choice and this is my identity. So
Mhm.
it's one of those things. And that nothing against vegans or whatever. I
Yeah.
really don't. I'm not a huge diet guy, but I think that's a good example where I guess keto is probably the more I guess the better example to use there because it's I guess a little bit more mainstream and it has less to do with ethics and whatnot, which I truly don't understand. But I guess with keto, it's easy because people the decision's made for them and they get the reward of knowing I am doing keto versus if you're not restricting yourself and you just eat healthy and you don't have that quick little easy thing to fall back on and say I can't have ice cream. It's your own discipline and your own consistency, like you mentioned, to say I'm not going to have ice cream.
Yeah. And then going back to another point you made about bodybuilding not being as systemically fatiguing, I think that's actually like incredibly important because like if you conflate hard work with systemic fatigue, you'll eventually turn every single exercise into just moving as much weight around as awkwardly as you possibly can. And like there's Balami Man said it best where he says like any exercise is a back exercise if you do it badly enough. And like most of the conversations about fatigue in a strength training context is around like your lower back or your spine or things of that nature. So it makes total sense why you'd make that comparison. And I think when it comes to like that hard work and stuff like that, it's super important and we can't like get away from it whatsoever. But I think we also should like let people know that hard work sometimes has that element of patience alongside of it. So I'm a boxing coach, I'm a boxing instructor, and one thing is like everyone wants to spar, everyone wants to like you know either put headgear on or not, or but they want to put on a mouthpiece and just like go at it. And my job as a coach more often than not is telling them like, no, don't do that, you shouldn't do that for a couple months at a time. Like, and the thing is what I'm telling them is not to not work hard, but not put themselves in the situation where they're going to limit their ability to put out more effort, put more workouts together. And I think that's why when it comes to like the value we have on consistency, it's because I'll use a stock market analogy. The people who are really rich from stocks are people who have the most time in the market, you know, like very few people can like redo their genetics. Many few people can redo, like no one can honestly, like how like their starting point or something of that nature. But what they can control is their time in the market, their time in the game. And a lot of people are looking for optimization. A lot of people are looking for things like that. But I would advocate for them to look for patience. Um, like the biggest piece of advice that I give to people is when they say like, oh, I've hit a plateau or this isn't working for me. The first thing I ask them is like, have you tried it 100 more times? And then usually like if they like, with, of course, with minor modifications and things of that nature, like they'll just get better. But I know that's like simple advice, I guess. But what are some key ideas that you want to pass on to your clients in order for them to be as successful as they can be?
Yeah, patience is a big one, and I think especially for bodybuilding, I think that's why so many this is a video I'll probably have in the future, but why so many intermediate bodybuilders or hypertrophy enthusiasts, whatever you want to call us, transition to powerlifting, because
Mhm.
they don't have the patience to stick with bodybuilding. And it's not that at the end of the day, you can put an equal effort into either, but there's not as many, uh, I guess, immediate checkpoints that you can get from something like bodybuilding that you could in powerlifting, where 5 pounds actually means something or 10 pounds actually means something. But in bodybuilding, those checkpoints that you can hit are a little bit more blurry. Like your measurements are a little bit more blurry. Your physique pictures are a little bit more blurry. It's not quite as, I guess, rewarding. But I think
Mm.
in a base building way, you'll be happier if you continue to pursue that, if that's your ultimate goal. But it takes a lot of patience because you can't just be cheating your technique trying to be a power lifter in bodybuilding. You can't chase strength all day and sacrifice your technique and everything if you do want to optimize everything. So I think it takes a lot of discipline, because it's not that maximalist do everything we can approach. It's that weird balance between finding the right technique but still training hard enough and trying to progress, but you don't want to progress too fast because you might be getting all these like technique changes or tempo changes and whatnot in your technique and everything. So it's a weird, bodybuilding's weird, man. That's that's the best way I can sum it up.
Nice. So one thing I wanted to like kind of ask you from that is like, what is your time frame then for like comparison, like or comparing like let's say progress pictures, for example. Like, do you do like monthly comparisons, like, or do you do like what time frame would you use for that?
Yeah, so monthly is helpful for progress pictures, but I'd argue the best use of progress pictures is comparing comparing them to previous cut and bulk cycles. So you can say, all right, how
Mm,
do I look at this body fat percentage versus this body fat percentage? And you can take pictures where if you're at the peak of your bulk uh, this time around and you look bigger than the peak of your bulk last time or something like that, or you look leaner at this picture at 190 than this older picture at 190, you look a little chubbier. That's a good sign of progress. So I think using progress pictures in relation to body weight, body fat percentage, and measurements is probably the best way to do it. I do advocate to take them once a month,
mm.
measurements and progress pictures. But I think comparing body weight relative to measurements in the same cut and bulk cycles over and over, comparing one cycle to the previous, is the best way to do it.
Nice. And then another thing, like you mentioned, was progression. So progression is really important for bodybuilding as well, but it's usually calibrated with other factors that I would argue are just as important for people who are more strength oriented, like powerlifters, strongmen, and stuff like that. You know, like there's for sure people who like if their concept of strength is point A to point B, like because they don't have competition standards, then all power to them. But once a competition standard is introduced, they have to adhere to it. So form does start to matter. However, like I'm fully aware that there's people who just throw around weight, right? But when it comes to bodybuilding progression, like what are some of the, um, I guess, more interesting factors that you think people kind of either neglect, don't fully understand, or don't fully appreciate, especially if they come from a more strength-sided perspective?
Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I guess you're asking what maybe people going into bodybuilding don't quite understand if they're coming from like a strength background, is kind of what you're asking.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, I'd say it's I guess when it comes to progression, you have to be able to, I personally take a more passive approach. Once you attach your reward to the progression itself, that's when you start to chase it. And the best thing you can do is maximize everything else and just let the progression happen. So I know that it's very vague and a lot of people aren't going to fully understand that. So I'd say if you're more of a beginner lifter, adding a rep to one, two, three of your sets on each lift each week is a great target to be hitting. For the more like intermediate guys, maybe adding a rep to one of your sets, maybe two of your sets for each lift every week, maybe every 2 weeks is usually where you'll be at. And then for the more advanced guys, like, and I'm not even here yet myself, but it seems to be in my observations closer to adding a rep every 2, 3, maybe even every 4 weeks. And it's just the name of the game with diminishing returns.
Hmm. Okay. And then like, would you say like how much would like something like form? Because I think you do something like form audits, you know, like whenever like before you kind of consider adding weight. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like before you consider adding weight, you kind of make sure that the form is still done in a way that the muscle is being properly stimulated and it's the limiting factor and things of that nature. Like, is that one of the like most important things you would say also, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think with a double progression, obviously you're adding reps more frequently than you're adding weight, but it is a double progression, so you're adding both. Once you get to that point where you're about to add some weight, resetting your technique and progressing in technique if you have let it loose a little bit is pretty helpful in my opinion. And this is super humbling because if you attach your ego to that performance marker that you hit and then you slightly optimize your technique, it can take a lot of performance away. And that's something
Yeah.
that a lot of people learn the hard way. Like for myself, if I was to like really clean up my say incline curls, for example, and just transition from my quote unquote slightly cheated technique to a very, very strict technique, I would be using like maybe 60, maybe 70% of the weight that I'm using now. And that can
Hmm.
feel like you've made no progress at all. But
Mm.
in reality, it's just a different lift. So you have to understand that just because you have worked with a weight that's heavier than you've used in the past, that doesn't mean the weight that's lighter than that is no longer stimulative. Or just
Mm.
because you
Yeah.
hit, say, 225 for 10 with terrible form on bench doesn't mean hitting 225 for 5 is no longer worth doing. Because then you're looking too much at the paper, not the actual stimulus that your muscle's feeling itself. So you have to look at what I would say is just proximity to failure and how much did that muscle get targeted. And usually better technique is going to do a better job of that. And that doesn't mean stricter, but more optimal, more efficient technique to
Hmm.
train that muscle perfectly is important. So I guess being able to detach yourself from the performance for a little bit and really ask yourself, do I want to keep running with this lift with trash form, or do I want to clean things up, drop the ego a little bit and continue to progress and check back to reality every now and then?
Yeah, definitely. I guess from the more strength side of things is something that I notice quite often when I get like new clients is sometimes they'll like I ask for like their current level of strength, right? And sometimes what I will come to find out after receiving their first batch of like form videos is that they use like extremely like beyond touch and go. Like it's literally like trampoline, like bench pressing. It is like uber like like 1/10 of a squat kind of situation, you know what I mean? And the deadlift, like usually the deadlift like thing, because it has like it starts from the floor. It had like the only like it's the range of motion isn't usually the issue. It's just like their setup and whatnot. um but you know those deviations in form, right? Those like the form that's like they're using, it does inflate their numbers. And then sometimes when I get them to use lighter weights, like they definitely think like I've been why are you even telling me to bench this amount of weight? I bench it this much, and like I have to like kind of like talk them into. I have to convince them into trying to train with lighter loads. Sometimes some people are just like, oh man, like they're very humble, they're very open to learning. But every now and then, like you'll get like people who are just unwilling to use lighter loads, and I was one of those people like for a lot of my training career also. Like
Yeah,
I
me
used
too.
to think, yeah, like I used to think that my touch and go bench, like because I was trampolining it as well, was a good representation of my strength when I wasn't controlling it, I wasn't pausing it, I was just throwing weight around essentially. And um it wasn't until I took form as seriously as I did that um things started to improve like truly. And I think that's so true in like almost every other pursuit. For some reason, I think like like I said, the good examples, the people who are doing things properly, they don't think this way. Like they valued form from day one. But when you do like have a numbers obsession, like some of the first things that go out the window is most definitely form. And I think it's really good that your channel has pointed that out like multiple times. So yeah, I really do like that. So one thing that I think is really cool too is that you've been your channel has been growing a lot, you know, like your audience has been growing a lot, and as a result, like people are like engaging with your content a lot more. Did anyone pose a question to you that really kind of like threw you for a loop, and then kind of like made you rethink things, or like would you say that you're, or not really?
No, I mean, I'm having a hard time thinking about anything off the top of my head.
Hmm.
I think a lot of the questions that I get, it's stuff that I've already heard before. So
Hmm.
I'd say the vast majority is that, and that's not to like put myself on a pedestal or say that I'm smarter than everyone because by no means is that true.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of the questions that I get, and it's normal when I'm, I guess, challenging things a little bit on my channel. These are all things that I've talked about extensively before, and maybe they're newer people that haven't seen all my content, or they're questions that I've already given my answer to, or I guess like quote unquote debunked before. I'm trying to think. I wish I had one off the top of my head, but I've definitely, I know I've had a couple that have like really made me think a lot. Um, I wish I could think of them because a lot of people do have super insightful questions in the comments, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. Like I sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, like I don't know if I'll keep this in. Sometimes I just go to your comment section to glean for like topic ideas, because like your audience and like mine too, um like they just have good questions, things that I don't consider, because like I admit, like I tell this to you all the time, like I'm in a bubble, dude. Like I just um it's, it's and I don't know how to like integrate myself more, like I guess you could say, because
Hmm.
like I just yeah, I don't know. Like, I think part of it is like something that I will do though is like I do plan on competing in powerlifting. Like my goals as far as like lifting is like I want to hit above a 1,500 pound total in like that 220, 242 range, and then after that I'm just gonna go full bodybuilder mode, honestly.
All right.
But I just feel like if I went to bodybuilding right now, I would be running away more than I would be like, you know, accepting a new challenge, you know.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, you have to do what you innately want, which I think for
Mm,
you is strength. And it's like if you hit your strength goal that you care about, like if you get to a 1,500 total and you're like, well, I hit my goal. Like, do I really want to chase a 1,600 total? Like, even if the 1,500 satisfied me, then you can probably have new goals. But I think it would be stupid to try and chase something else before you achieve what you want to. I made
mhm,
that mistake and it sucked.
mm. And that was like your power building, powerlifting phases.
Yeah, exactly. I did, and this is probably the biggest misconception about me personally is that a lot of people will say, like, oh, everything you say is just ridiculous. Like, why don't, like, some people will be more aggressive like that. Oh, this is
Mm,
so ridiculous. Like, how are you saying this as a guy that built his entire base from power building? And I'm like, here we go again. I did not build
mhm,
my base from power building. I built it from
mhm,
bodybuilding,
mhm.
went into power building, stalled out entirely, went back to bodybuilding, and magically started making gains again. And then some
Yeah.
those are less common, but I do get some people saying like, hey man, I hear what you're saying, but don't you think that like, or like, what are your thoughts on your power building potentially giving you all of these new gains? And I'm like, oh well, thanks for
Mm,
being respectful, but uh, I never stopped making bodybuilding gains from bodybuilding training. It was when I changed my training entirely that my bodybuilding gains actually stopped. Now that I'm back to it, they're resuming again, and it doesn't surprise me. I don't think there's any correlation between that and any extra strength that I built up.
yeah, 100%. And then also like, what's it? So I think what's really nice about your channel and your approach to a lot of things is because you know how like we say like we're not that much smarter, we're like barely or not smarter at all than most people, because like honestly that's the god
Yeah,
honest truth.
just like a normal person.
Yeah, right. And the thing is like we are just, you know, somewhat further along in a very similar like I guess like path or mindset, and as a result we can kind of give you an idea of like, you know, like when I was like, you know, the I guess a hiking example would be good. Like on a hike, like, you know, if someone's like trailing behind you a bit, like I'll just tell them like, hey, watch out for this rock, or watch out for this like fall over here. You know, it's it's kind of like in that sense. It's just like we've treaded that path. We kind of have an idea of what's there, um, and as a result, we can tell you like what to avoid, what to think about, and that's kind of like at least where I see myself. I don't really think of myself as like giving people the path or something of that nature. It's just like I, if this is the if you decided to walk a path similar to my own, like here are the pitfalls that you might like come across, and like here are the things that I did to kind of deal with that, and then just give you like that to so you can find a solution for yourself. And that's what's so cool about the community now too. And sometimes like people in the comment section are getting involved in that also. Like they might not create content, but they'll give us their own experiences, and we are benefiting from it also. Like I didn't do certain exercises for quite a while, just because I didn't really find all that much value in them, because they were either like, I just thought of them in either like that binary of strength or size, right? It wasn't really building on my strength, and it wasn't really specific to the size I needed, so I just ignored it. But then like I get a comment where they'll say like, use it as a warm up for this exercise, and I was like, oh, I never really thought about it that way. And then like boom, like now 2 exercises that didn't have that much value to me are super valuable now. So I really like that about the community now. Like, what are your thoughts on like the community, where it's at and where it's going, and whatnot?
Yeah, as of now, I think the fact that we can say we're in a golden age while we're in it
Mhm.
speaks to how solid the community really is. So first off, I think it's cool that me and you are a part of it. It
Yeah.
didn't feel right to see everything kind of going on with the natural community and not to put my 2 cents in. I don't know how you feel about that, but you seem to be at least similar to myself in that way. But I guess the way I see it is like if I'm going to be someone, like I might not be the smartest guy, I might not be the most experienced or the oldest guy here by any means, but if I'm somebody that does, and this is what we started talking about, is like I'm a nerd about normal people things like lifting or something. So if I'm gonna nerd out about lifting and put all these hours into figuring things out and just locking myself in a room and coming up with these ideas and articulating it and thinking about it while I'm mowing the lawn and whatnot, and just really learning all this stuff, why would I keep that to myself? So
Hmm.
I guess the way I see it is, why not put some of that advice out there, and just one, just for fun because I like to be creative with it, and two, to actually help people, which is something that I didn't expect to happen, but I think is happening now. And I think it's a movement that I've kind of wanted since day one. I think being a natural lifter in the fitness industry is lonely before, like, what, a couple of these bigger natural channels started to blow up a little bit. Before that, it was so lonely. Like I remember just I would lift by myself, or like I've had a couple lifting buddies, but not to be that guy, but like in most commercial gyms, all the guys that are like big are just on gear, and everybody else just has no idea what they're doing. It's just rare to see somebody like me or you in a gym where I would always feel like I feel like I'm the only one here that's truly like a natural lifter that's training properly. So
Hmm.
I think to see that community start to build up, it's cool. And I think we've needed it for a really long time. And the fact that we're not just discovering other natural lifters that are like-minded, which I think of like as a noble natties, we're all kind of similar in certain ways, but to also bring other people in that
Hmm.
have that same mindset, and even to have new lifters come in and have this be the mindset that they get to start with, and the people that they learn from to start with, it is awesome. Because we didn't, like, let's face it, me and you didn't have that when we first started lifting. So
Hmm.
I think it's cool to be able to help people that uh, are into the same stuff we are.
Yeah, 100%. I remember like, so when I was coming into fitness, let's see, people that were really big at the time, Athlete Next was already growing at that time. Six Pack
Yeah.
Shortcuts was still around.
Oh yeah.
Um,
We started at the same time, which I love.
yeah, right. Yeah, so we know like, and then
That was Yeah, no
Elliot
worries.
Hulse too.
Oh yeah, yeah. Elliot Hulse was the man back in the day. I used to
Hmm.
love watching his videos. They'd be like 10 minutes long, and it would just be some like super passionate, like over the top philosophical video where he's like
Yeah.
just in that little garage gym. And
Uh-huh.
he's a pretty smart dude. You can say what you want about him now, but if you look at his old content, I think a lot of it's good stuff, especially
Uh-huh.
where me and you were at when we started. But yeah,
100%.
Athlete X, he was huge. Six Pack Shortcuts was huge. Rich Piana, Callum
Hmm.
Von Boger. That was right
Hmm.
when like Bradley Martin started to come up too.
Coming
Like
up to, yeah.
Scott Herman was big. That was right when, kind of like when Jeff Nippard started making like actual content, not
Around
just
that time also, yeah. And then of course like Omar Isov, Alan Thrall, Alex Leonidas, previously known as
yeah,
Alpha Destiny at that time.
yeah,
um like once, like I would say like once I discovered Omar, Alan Thrall and Alex, like that's when like things like just changed so much. And I just had this feeling like, you know what, in 10 years, there's gonna be a lot of like really buff, jacked like individuals, and like we're kind of seeing that now. Like before
Yeah.
even that 10-year mark too.
Oh, 100%. I would have to say, yeah, I think when I was an absolute beginner, it was mostly channels like Scott Herman or Athlete X that probably
Hmm.
helped the most.
Hmm.
And then it was, yeah, Alex Leonidas, well, Alpha Destiny back then. I discovered him after a year or so of lifting, and that was kind of the real thing that I guess probably took me to that next level, just in terms of like training intensity and really like
Hmm.
pushing hard. And like I remember trying like above the knee rack pulls and power shrugs for the first time, all kind of inspired by him.
Yeah, yeah.
And the I guess the way he could just kind of get so passionate about these like really specific little lifting topics, and he just seemed to be head and shoulders above everybody else in terms
Hmm.
of just knowledge and passion too. And I think that's what drove me to next level. I was always looking for someone that was a little more experienced than me, a little older, that could kind of give me that advice. And that's what I'm trying to be now. So I think
Mm.
he had a dope channel. Still, obviously, his channel is
Still
even
does,
10 times better now.
right? It's kind
Wow.
of crazy, like because he had an impressive physique even back then, you know, like
Yeah.
for his age and everything. Like he was like just in general like impressive as hell. And then now like he stepped on stage, he's like and everything like that, just completely different like guy, like just incredible, you know.
Yeah. Huge difference. And it's not like he's just the advanced lifter that like, oh, I
Hmm.
stayed the same everywhere else, but like I managed to grow my calves and my forearms because I just never trained them before. Like, no, he's actually legitimately more jacked all around than he
Hmm.
was 4 years ago, which I think is super impressive.
Yeah, and even more than that, like he's owned up to like his own faults in his training, you know. Like I think that's something that I work on for myself also. Like there are things that I'm going to be like correcting in my own training, because the results I've been getting are not because of genetics or anything like that. It's because I've been training. I've either neglected training those areas or I've been training them improperly. And one thing I really respect about so many of like this community is like we fully own up to you know, we're just not doing things, we weren't doing things like properly, we weren't doing things with the right mindset. And then when we get that mindset, we show that like it's possible, and it's we're going to like we're heavily rewarded from like self-belief and like putting ourselves in those situations where like we force ourselves to grow in that way. So like it's really amazing to see like there's this like whole ecosystem of people who are just immune to black pills. And to know that more people are viewing that, like, you know, my channel is very small, our channels are definitely in the minority of like the overall lifting sphere of like who's watching and whatnot. But to know that even though there's stuttering like 50,000 people, hundred thousands of people who are like receiving this message and knowing that what is possible, and like constantly shown like what proper training can do for someone, it's just such a nice it's such a nice hopeful thing, you know.
Spot on. I agree 100% with that. It's cool to see, because people have been so black pilled, myself included, about what it is to truly train like as a natural. Where people talk about the whole, oh, you make 90% of your gains after 3 years. What's the point of continuing on? You see all these guys that are like, oh, I've already made all my bodybuilding gains. Time to just go to powerlifting. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
there were no like role models. There were no people that actually kind of stood up and fought for natural lifting or natural bodybuilding in particular. So
Mm-hmm.
it's cool to see that, because I definitely struggled with like lifting nihilism for a really long time, to the point where I actually stopped lifting for a while,
Mm.
just to kind of reset my entire mindset around lifting. So it's been cool to have other people be able to do that for me. So I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say I fixed it myself. I think people like Alex Leonidas or the rest of the noble natties, like natural hypertrophy, especially
Yeah.
that guy's been a legend for truly reviving the natural bodybuilding mindset, which was lost for so long. So those people I have a lot of respect for, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what we needed.
Yeah, I love it too, and really grateful for all your contributions. Also, I don't want to understate that. Like you have brought many things to my mind as well. So I'm incredibly grateful for the content you put out. If you are somehow not subscribed to Basement Bodybuilding and you're watching this, make sure to check out his channel. He also does coaching services. Are you taking clients on right now?
Yeah, I've got a few open spots.
Nice, nice. So, yep. He is Basement Bodybuilding on Instagram, Basement Bodybuilding on YouTube. Hit him up for coaching. Watch his content. Really, some of the best out there. He's going to be one of the next big channels in this small sphere of ours. But like, it's just going to keep growing, and he's going to be one of the best sources of information. I highly recommend his channel. Anything you want to say for closing remarks?
No, I'd say everything you said about me, likewise back to you. You've been a huge help for me. I've learned a ton from watching you and your videos. So thanks a ton, for I always appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, man. All right, so that's it for the video. I always fuck on my intro. I mess this or outro. I keep messing it up. Like, God damn it. Like, I don't know how Steve does it, or like most people do. I'm trying to have it. I think it's cool because like now I have that music. The only reason why I'm trying to stick to this outro is because like I just think my outro music is fucking dope. So let's see. Oh yeah. All right, so that's it for the end of. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. See, I had it and then I lost it.
You want me to just do it?
If you know it, fuck it.
You don't want my outros. It's like the amount of comments that I get. You should do an outro. Your endings are super abrupt.